Straight out the box.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Listography. Jason, Joe, and Krams are here. And this week we are recapping the 80s. If you've been watching our Albums of the Year series, we just finished up 1989 this past Friday. For anyone who's new to the channel or maybe just randomly landing on this video, we have a series on this channel called Albums of the Year, where each of us pick our favorite album of the year and also give 4 runners-up each. And so we're looking back at the 80s now. Today, we're going to rank our 10 winners each. So not necessarily our top 10, but just the 10 winners, one from each year of the 80s. And we're also going to talk a little bit more about the 80s in kind of general terms as well. But if you haven't seen the original series, I would recommend going back and checking that out. We will be giving spoilers in this video. Who wants to rank their winners first?
I can rank mine first. I'm not afraid. For the 1980s, I started out, got Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath in 1980, Trust by Elvis Costello in 1981, Signals by Rush in 82, although that was, that's a controversial because The Dreaming came out that year and, it might replace it eventually, but 1983, Punch the Clock by Elvis Costello, again, 2 winners. He's the only 2-time winner of the 80s for me. 1984, Purple Rain by Prince. 85, I had Hounds of Love by Kate Bush. 86, The Queen is Dead by The Smiths. 1987, Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. 88, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son by Iron Maiden. And finishing off the 80s, I had a classic from a 70s band, Pump by Aerosmith.
Doing all those back-to-back, you really went with a lot of hard, heavier rock.
I really didn't get into like the 80s sound that much other than, Kate Bush. Purple Rain's pretty 80s, but it has a lot of, like 70s funk and stuff too. So not a lot of the synth or, shoegaze or, college rock, really just kind of artists that would have fit in the 70s for my 80s, which I didn't expect really when I went into the 80s. I thought it'd be a little more diverse, but what are you going to do? Ranking my winners, I'm going to have to go number 10. I got Pump by Aerosmith, and then Punch the Clock by Elvis Costello, Hounds of Love by Kate Bush, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son by Iron Maiden. Then I got Signals by Rush, The Queen is Dead by The Smiths. In 4th place, Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. 3rd place, Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath. 2nd place, Trust by Elvis Costello. And the winner, undisputed champion of the 1980s, possibly the best album ever made, Purple Rain by Prince. Nothing else comes close for me. Although, Elvis Costello with the 2 in the 80s could have had 4. A year ago, I probably would have put Get Happy, my winner for 80, and I could have gone with Imperial Bedroom, the winner for 1982. Which would have given him 5 in a row, considering he won in 79 for me. So Elvis Costello and Prince, definitely my sort of kings of the 80s.
I would have guessed, I figured Purple Rain was going to be your 1, but I thought your other top 3 were going to be Appetite for Destruction and Kate Bush. I thought those would be the top 3, but pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, that Kate Bush was my 3rd favorite. So if I had gotten The Dreaming on there, might have hit the top 3, but that's for our remixes in 5 years when we redo the top 5. So we'll see what happens then.
All right. For me, I led off 1980 with my first repeat winner in Album of the Year with Bruce Springsteen with The River. And then I kicked off another back-to-back series here, 81 Moving Pictures by Rush, and then 82 Signals by Rush. 1983, I had War by U2. 1984, along with Joe, I had Purple Rain by Prince. 1985, I had Psycho Candy by the Jesus and Mary Chain. 1986, I had So by Peter Gabriel. 1987 winner was Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me by The Cure. 88 was Green by REM. Finally, I thought they were going to be the band that just never got the love they deserved from me, but they did. And then rounding out the year, 1989 with Pretty Hate Machine by 9 Inch Nails. So I think I got a pretty nice mix of stuff here. And if you really look from 1980 with something like The River compared to what I ended it with 9 Inch Nails, really nice just kind of demonstration of the variation of sound and where music went and where my taste's gone, but whatever. Here we go for my top 10. Bringing up the rear, sadly, is REM with Green. I swear to God, I love REM. I swear to God. Number 9 is going to be Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me by The Cure. Number 8 from 1989 is Pretty Hate Machine by 9 Inch Nails. Number 7 is going to be Moving Pictures by Rush. Number 6 is going to be Signals by Rush. So you can read into that what will come of a potential Rush list. Number 5 will be The River by Bruce Springsteen. Number 4 will be Psycho Candy by the Jesus and Mary Chain. Number 3, the winner is War by U2. Number 2 is Purple Rain by Prince. I'm with Joe, maybe the most iconic sounding album of the 80s, but one of my all-time favorite albums ever, a top 5 album for me, is So by Peter Gabriel. And 1986, my favorite album of the 1980s.
Interesting, and also interesting that you had all of the late 80s stuff down at the bottom.
I was, because especially I consider 87 and 89 really strong years for the collective volumes, but yeah, it was tough when I really looked at, everything. My top 5, other than So with 86, is all 80 to 85, so yeah. But it is what it is.
For 1980, I had Peter Gabriel 3, aka Melt. 81, I had Trust by Elvis Costello. And in 82, he went back to back with Imperial Bedroom. 83, I've got Speaking in Tongues by Talking Heads. 84, Heartbeat City by The Cars. 85, I had The Head on the Door by The Cure. 1986, I had Skylarking by XTC. 87, You're Living All Over Me by Dinosaur Jr. 88, Love Junk by The Pursuit of Happiness. And in 89, I had Doolittle by Pixies. So the bottom for me is going to be Imperial Bedroom at number 10. Love this album. Love Elvis Costello. But in almost any other year, this would not be my top pick. 82, a very weak year for me. Number 9, again, love this band and love this album. But compared to the others, it's got to go at number 9. I've got Love Junk by The Pursuit of Happiness. At number 8, I've got Speaking in Tongues by Talking Heads. At number 7, I've got Trust by Elvis Costello. At number 6, I've got Skylarking by XTC. At number 5, I'm going with You're Living All Over Me by Dinosaur Jr. Number 4, The Head on the Door by The Cure. Number 3, I've got Peter Gabriel 3 or Melt. Number 2, I've got Doolittle by the Pixies. My favorite album of the 80s is Heartbeat City by The Cars. And I said it in that video that I love this album way more than most people. And this just goes to show that that is absolutely true. I will concede that it is largely because of the sound of it and the production, but the songs are great too. And yeah, to me, this really is the 80s too. It's really defines what the decade is all about, as well as being a great record. So that's my pick for my favorite album of the decade.
Good pick. I thought, judging from how romantically you described the Pixies Doolittle, and when you revealed it as your winner in 89, I thought the way you were kind of talking about it, that it might win, and it came in second, so pretty close. Did we have any? We don't have any three. We don't have an artist that won a year for all of us, do we? Did we in the 70s?
In the same year?
No, but I mean, like me and Joe both had Prince win. You guys both had Elvis win. We don't have a collective artist that each won a year for us in the 80s.
I don't think we do in the 70s either, did we?
I can't imagine who it would be.
I don't think so, no.
Neil Young didn't win anything for Jason. I know it won for me and Joe.
Fleetwood Mac won for you and Jason, not for me. Me and Kram had a bunch. We had Elton John. We had Zeppelin. We had Neil Young. So we definitely had a couple.
Yeah. Interesting. Will it happen in the 90s?
So we've talked about it pretty much in every episode going through the 80s, the relative strength of the years. And watching the videos back, I contradicted myself multiple times, saying which years were good and which ones were bad, or which ones I thought were better than others. But now that the dust has settled, what are you guys thinking as far as best year, worst year?
Well, let's start with worst year because I thought this was easier to pick than best year. And I'm going with 1981. Just kind of looking at my fifth favorite around each one, that's kind of the reason. Definitely not 82. I mean, Thriller didn't even make my list in 82. So that's definitely, like, when I look at 81, there's nothing that really jumps out. There's not even a lot of great live albums. It's just got that kind of weird carryover from kind of the softness of the late 70s. There's nothing really, no big carryover for me from any great 70s bands, and the 80s kind of style that I really like hasn't taken off yet. That is the year I had Moving Pictures win. Ghost in the Machine by the Police, I like a good bit, was up there as well. But yeah, I think that was a pretty easy pick for me. I feel like there was a lot of bands putting out stuff with great name recognition, but their best stuff would come later in the year or even in 82.
For me, I definitely prefer the mid to late 80s. For the weakest year, I'm going to go 82. I think it has my weakest top five of any year, and it's also got very little depth beyond that weak top five. There's almost nothing that was in consideration. And a close second place would be 81. And I actually think those are my two least favorite years of all time. Looking ahead, I don't think anything is worse.
That's just insanity as far as I'm concerned. Just total insanity. For me, clearly 1985, and I believe I made my stance very clear during the video. Other than Kate Bush and Tears for Fears, everything else was pretty meh. That was the year everyone was involved in We Are the World and Live Aid and stuff, and nobody was putting out anything. So 85 just by far probably the worst year ever for anything. Also the year I was born, so I think that says a lot about me. Yeah, 1985, just nothing there. I struggled to find a fifth.
No, I thought 85 is probably around third or fourth favorite year for me, I'd say. I liked 85 a good bit. But it is starting to get in that territory that you don't really love. I mean, I think this exercise for the 80s for you, Joe, really just made you realize how much you just really love the 70s.
Yeah, most of my 80s winners were from the 70s. The only real 80s band for me that won, Prince is an 80s artist, but he started in the 70s. Kate Bush started in the 70s. The Smiths and Guns N' Roses are really the only bands that, were created from the 80s to win anything. So, even bands that I thought I liked, that have a bunch of hit singles, people like Duran Duran, and I like REM, and I like Madonna, and I like all these artists, but they couldn't crack the top five. There's too much of those old school, the Genesises and the Rushes and Elvis Costellos, pretty much just taking top spots.
The thing, Rush, definitely a band from the 70s, but a totally different sound in the 80s. So almost kind of a drastic difference there. For me, the only real carryover is 1980 with Springsteen. The River could sound like a 70s album, but I think everything else for me really marks the decade pretty well.
So how about best year of the decade? It's a little tougher to pick, but what do you got?
I got 89 by a mile. It's probably next to 1971 and 75 and 79, probably my fourth favorite year that we've done so far.
I'm going to stick with 84. Even though 87, 88, 89, I might like those top fives better than my 84 top five. I think 84 goes a little deeper.
For me, it was basically in the 70s. I got 1980. I had about 16 albums I considered for the top five. Ridiculous amounts of stuff. There's even albums that I wish maybe would have even made my top five that I kind of really got into after when we started listening to Peter Gabriel 3 and Never Forever by Kate Bush. So there was just too much, just way too much for me in the 1980 year. That would be definitely my winner.
I think the thing with me with 89 is you're really starting to get a lot of new sound. You've got stuff by De La Soul, and you've got these really good hip hop albums, and you've got the grunge slow boyo happening. I don't even remember mentioning Louder Than Love by Soundgarden on the 89 video, but that's my favorite Soundgarden album. You got just a really cool, diverse mix of really good different genres kind of blending into the forefront. And I think the pop scene in the late 80s into the early 90s is really good, and that kind of marks it here with Janet Jackson and Whitney Houston and stuff like that. So, and 89 is like also just like a comeback year for a lot of great artists. Like, you love Pump by Aerosmith, I love Freedom by Neil Young, Full Moon Fever I like a good bit. There's just, yeah, I thought that was easy, and it might not just be my fourth favorite. It might be better than 75. Definitely not better than 71 or 79 for me, but it's up there, man. I really love it. Beastie Boys, come on. I mean, it's loaded.
It was my fourth least favorite of the 80s, so not anywhere near my favorite.
Farthest from the 70s, so.
Exactly.
So how about those bands that just couldn't get over the hump? Your consistent sixth place, or like Kram was talking about REM, that he was afraid they would never crack in, but who are the bands for the 80s that never cracked in for you guys?
Looking at my list, I feel like just about everyone I really like got on at least once, but probably not as much as they would be represented in like an all-time list. Like someone like REM, I think only got nominated twice for me, but they'd be really high up. I might even have them higher than like The Cure, but The Cure I think I nominated 4 or 5 times and they won once. So it's kind of like an uneven mix here. If I'm being completely honest, the stuff that didn't make my list is kind of unofficially just the pop music singles of the 80s. So like none of those albums are getting in, but it's my favorite era of pop music. But if I really had to pick, the artist that just never really got in is probably Van Halen. I mean, I still love Van Halen. I love a lot of their 80s stuff. I love them as a collective whole and as like a list of songs and as a style of a band and as Eddie as a player. But, none of their albums really came close. But they would definitely have consideration for like my top 100 favorite artists. But, it's just kind of weird how that works out.
For me, I had a couple different artists. A lot of those 80s artists, Duran Duran, I thought would definitely get in. I like Duran Duran a lot, but couldn't quite crack it. I mean, there's people like Hall & Oates who have a lot of singles I like, but they're just not an albums band. I like a bunch of Journey albums in the 80s. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers never made it, never nominated in 70s or 80s. Kind of surprising. I like Tom Petty a bit. The first 2 Marshall Crenshaw albums I like a lot, but stiff competition. Talk, REM.
You had Full Moon Fever in 89.
Well, Tom Petty solo. But all those Heartbreaker albums, and no David Bowie either. So a lot of artists I like, but probably not in my top 25 all time. So I think the 80s kind of represented a little bit better. It was a little easier than the 70s to get on, like everybody. Pretty much everyone had a turn, so. And even Aerosmith, who didn't make it in the 70s, finally got it in 1989. The 80s, I don't know. I don't like them. I'll just repeat myself again. No, they're great. Great decade.
For me, interestingly, not a band that I really think of all that often or consider one of my favorite bands, but going back through the records each year and checking them out again, The Cult, they were always kind of hanging around in the top 10 for me. Their first album and Love and Sonic Temple, all are great. And another band that did make one of my lists and actually won in 86 for me, XTC. But it seemed like every year they were in the mix, but that was the only time they broke through.
Yeah, like I love The Police, but I didn't consider anything outside of Ghost in the Machine. They're a tricky band for me to put my finger on because they just have so many songs that I love, and I love Ghost in the Machine. And go back and watch the Police video. Love most of Synchronicity, but Some of it is just ruined. Yeah, I mean, Sonic Youth only got one album on there. Kate Bush, I think I only nominated for Hounds of Love, but there's just too many artists that exist, to be honest.
All right, guys. So feel free down in the comments to go ahead and rank your winners if you've been playing along. Interested to see everybody's list. If you're new to the channel, we're still going with this. Friday will be 1990, and you got all the old videos to go back and check out all the way back to 1965. Give the video a like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, be sure to do so. Hit the bell so that you get notifications. And check down in the description for links to all of our social media accounts. See you in the next one.